Hey, Mike, you say the prayer? Say a prayer. Good afternoon. Welcome to the February 22nd Economic Development Committee meeting. We've got 3 bills, and before we get started, I'm going to ask Senator Hodges if he'd say the prayer. What mic is that, 9?
9, please.
Go ahead.
If you would, pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for the opportunity to live in this wonderful state. Thank you for all the other many blessings that you've bestowed upon us. Lord, be with us as we tend to the affairs of our state and lead us and guide us and give us your wisdom. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you. All right, our first bill is Senate Bill 55 from Senator Parent. If you'll come on up here, tell us the changes you've made. We've already had a public hearing on this, and let us know what LC number you're working off to make sure we're on the same one.
Thank you, Chairman. Am I on?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am looking at LC 540211S.
Okay.
The changes, we had, the issue came up.
Can you hold on one?
Certainly.
Let's let her in.
Now you got the bill. Lemonade, baby.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Senator James. Okay.
Yes, so
Proceed.
LC 540211S.
Okay.
The members of the committee may recall that at our last hearing about the Lemonade Stand Act, there was some concern that we needed to narrow it to make sure that certain things like tattooing, et cetera, would not be sanctioned by children. And so what we've done here is limited the bill more towards its direct original purpose, which is the ability to sell lemonade or other potentially non-hazardous, non-alcoholic beverages, and I'm looking at line 24 and 25 there,
Okay.
or non-consumable goods. The other change was the original bill had gross receipts of $3,000 or below in a calendar year, and we bumped that to $5,000. The reason, there was some discussion about making that unlimited. The reason that I'm not presenting you myself with that change is because it makes it more likely than an adult could try to, if it was unlimited
Right.
revenues or receipts, it makes it more likely an adult might try to utilize the provision to hide their own business and use a child as a friend.
Okay. You got a question? Mr. Chairman, number 7.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This ought to be the most simple piece of legislation we ever put out, but by non-consumable goods or lemonade or other non-potentially hazardous, how about Girl Scout cookies? They don't fall under that category.
I think, I've been thinking about Girl Scout cookies. They clearly have something set up in the law that permits them to do that through their organization.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure if Senate Research wants to look that up right now. I mean, I assume that throughout the history of America, someone would have raised that as an issue across the country if they were selling consumable goods illegally. But more directly to kind of the point you're driving at, Mr. Chairman, different states have done this differently. Some have made it lemonade or drinks only. Some have language related to particular kinds of food, prepackaged, for example, which Girl Scout cookies is. So it's prepackaged, it's not homemade. Prepackaged is a way to go where you don't open up any public safety concerns because you're not operating out of a home kitchen. Some states have no limit on what the children are allowed to sell, which is more similar to the bill that I originally brought you, which was based off Tennessee. This, though, I've worked closely with the Department of Public Health and the Agriculture Department, and we do know that the most common thing for kids to get out there and sell and kind of get their start. The thing that's the most common, the thing that's been shut down in our state at least 3 or 4 times in recent years has been lemonade stands.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
that's why I landed on this. Of course, you guys are the committee.
Okay, any other questions from members? Senator McLaurin, which one? 3?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Would the senator be amenable to a quick amendment that added prepackaged foods to that list?
I am, yes, and you guys are the committee, I'm not against that.
Okay, and I'll intend to make that amendment for the committee to consider.
Okay, I'll let you make the amendment, and I'll let you make the amendment and the motion
Perfect, that sounds good.
as amended.
Okay.
First off, we're not having a public hearing, but I do see Mr. Maxwell, and y'all represent Department of Public Health?
No, the Public Health Association.
Okay, Public Health Association, are you?
We're good with Bill.
Okay,
We appreciate the senator working with us.
all right, thank you. Thank you for working with everybody on this.
Absolutely. Like the leader said, we need it to be, want it to be easy.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Senator McLaurin, we'll entertain a motion or an amendment.
Terrific, and
Okay.
the will of the committee would be to do the DUPAS motion first?
Well, no, you want to amend it
Amended
first.
Okay, all right, then I'll move to amend, and then I'm working off of, this is 540211S? is that
Yes.
right? Okay. So the amendment would be on line 24. After non-consumable goods, I would insert the words "or prepackaged foods,"
Okay.
and that's the amendment.
You got that? Y'all got that? And we got a motion and a second, so we're going to vote on the amendment first. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand.
Discussion, wait.
You want discussion?
My question is, can you resell prepackaged food, like Little Debbie cakes? Can you resell those? You can? Okay.
Could I speak now?
Yes,
Okay.
speak to that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So my thinking here would be that there is no health or safety consequences because it's prepackaged and there's lots of regulations on packaged foods. I don't think that selling like bottled water, for example, would fall under this amendment because it would be
That
prepackaged
was my
foods
question, 'cause
as
that's
opposed to
how you can
beverages.
produce water boys out of these.
Yeah.
Well, I think the bill deals with beverages already in its current form. I was just intending to add, to address the
To Girl
chairman's
Scout
point about-
cookies.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any other? Senator
I
Ma-
just want to add, y'all know I worked for the Boy Scouts for 16 years. Popcorn and for Girl Scout cookies, that is already prepackaged. It's done by FDA licensed business that produces and promulgates the product. And they work with the local council as a fundraiser to sell the cookies or the popcorn. So they don't manufacture it themselves. They work with a company. And there's actually 3 companies that do popcorn, 2 or 3 that do cookies. And so this would have no effect or bearing on that at all.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. We're going to go ahead and vote on the amendment first. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous on the amendment. Now we'll go to the passage of, do I have a motion
Move to pass, Mr. Chairman.
on SB 127 as amended?
As amended, sir, yes.
What's that?
She was asking about water boys, line 22, and the bill would prevent that from being.
Okay.
Okay. So now we have a motion on SB 122 as amended. Do I have a second? Second by Senator James. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All right, unanimous? Any opposed? Nope. Okay, so it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. and
Appreciate
members
you
of the
working with
committee.
everybody on this. All right, where's Senator Hickman? Oh, yeah, there you are. We've got Senate Bill 127, and we're working off LC 472163. Tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've actually got 2 gentlemen that will also help me out. Chris Hardman, and he's with the Director of Governmental Affairs and Membership, and I think many of y'all know Mr. Lee Hughes sitting behind me. So as we get through this, we'll bring them up. This is, as so many of our bills, this is a very simple bill. We're working off SB 127, LC 472163. And of course, this relates to, when you really get into it, a lot of convention, basically these are destination marketing organizations are commonly referred to as Convention and Visitors Bureau, okay? And why this bill is so important is that a lot of these conventions, of course, are booked 3, 4, 5 years in advance. So the meat of this bill is to put more meat in the in the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So A lot of the language in this bill was, the GMA helped us out with the language. This bill is both, the GMA and ACCG are neutral on this bill. The bill basically prevents a local government, your city or county, from altering an agreement with their destination marketing organization, which typically is Convention and Visitors Bureau, or changing to another destination marketing organization without either the approval of the destination marketing organization, Convention and Visitors Bureau, or the approval of the Performance Review Board, and we'll talk about that in just a second, of the Department of Community Affairs, okay? And obviously what that's important is because, as I said, these conventions are booked so many years out in advance. The Performance and Review Board is made up of 11 people, and as I said, it comes out of the Department of Community Affairs, individuals from all over the state of Georgia, on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, and includes representatives from both the GMA and ACCG. And this applies to local governments that are generating more than $500,000 a year in hotel motel tax revenue. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, as we well know, booked, as I said, years in advance. So often these years it takes to build and establish those relationships. So consistency, professionalism, and continuity are very important. There have been some instances of misuse of these funds. This bill enhances the ability of the state to oversee the use of the funds and correct problems using an existing oversight organization. So basically, this clarifies how the hotel motel tax is being spent. And I would welcome any questions at this point.
All right. Before we go to questions, do you have somebody else that wants to testify or talk about it at all, or are you just here to answer questions?
No,
I think the senator did a fine job.
Okay.
I think they're here to just kind of back up, you know.
Just to help you?
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
that's right.
Any questions?
One for Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right.
I like your bill, Senator Hickman. I'm just curious where the $500,000 came from.
Chris, would you mind answering that?
I knew you'd need some backup.
Well, happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Chris Hardman. I'm with the Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association. We represent the entire hospitality and tourism industry, which creates about $70 billion in economic impact. So thank you for having me. Your question on the $500,000, I think that was language that we worked with the Georgia Municipal Association to come to an agreement on. And we wanted to make sure that all parties were happy when we worked on this piece of legislation so that we can benefit all of the hospitality and tourism industry here in the state of Georgia.
Okay.
And that basically, Senator Summers, is about 70 to 80 jurisdictions that fall in that line.
Definitely.
Okay, you got it. I've got a quick question. I know that a lot of the hotel and motel tax goes to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and then they try to market and use marketing in magazines and different things. There's been a lot of talk about creating a fund to go after Super Bowls and to go after Final Fours and to go after, we've just got the World Cup. There's been a lot of talk about when you go after those events, they go raise money from the private sector. Would this bill allow them to spend money or be part of a big group that's going after if it's in their area and they're going after a big sporting event, whether it's a golf tournament or a, like I said, Final Four, All-Star game in Cobb County? Would Cobb County then be able to use funds from their Convention and Visitors Bureau to help to go try to win that bid, if you will?
So absolutely. I mean, I think it's, in order to understand the hotel motel tax, it's probably the most confusing section in Title 48. To be completely honest, there are 3 buckets to consider. There's a percentage that goes to the local government's general fund. There's another percentage that goes to the TCT, which is a restricted fund, and that's what goes to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And they can only use those funds for marketing purposes, for promotional activities. But there is another piece that goes to tourism product development. And to what you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that portion of the funds could absolutely go to creating larger events. But this bill deals with that restricted funds that goes to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and it clarifies some language to protect the intended use of those funds so that when a Convention and Visitors Bureau is looking to book the All-Star game in Cobb County, 3, 4, 5 years in advance, they won't feel threatened that they might lose their contract with the local government, so they can continue that relationship and continue those with the relationship with the groups that they book years in advance, and not have that contract canceled on them. So,
Okay.
So the answer is yes.
yes.
Okay.
Quick answer.
All right, any other questions? Senator Hodges?
Yeah, just a quick question. Typically, a county or city government and a CVB have an agreement whereby the CVB gets a certain percentage of this income. And occasionally, the local government will decide to increase their hotel motel tax. So what happens, what happens in that instance? If the county government wants to go from 5 to 6% and their agreement doesn't stipulate, on the new money, if there's a disagreement about where the new money goes, if it's a 55-45 split right now,
Right.
how does that, you see what I'm talking about?
So, I know Lee is a genuine expert when it comes to CVBs, but this relates to the Hotel Motel Tax Performance Review Board. And if there was a disagreement in
Any
regards to that,
disagreement, period.
any
Okay.
disagreement as it relates to changing or altering that CVB,
Yeah, I would
it
think.
would go to the PRB.
I would think that most agreements between municipalities or counties and CVBs would cover what would happen in the increase of, or in the event of an increase in hotel motel taxes. But if it doesn't, and that happens, is that a disagreement? Mr. Hughes?
So I think the way I'd answer that is, I want to repeat what, my name's Lee Hughes. I represent the Georgia Association of Convention and Visitors Bureaus and the Tourism Leadership Council. Chris Hardman referred to earlier, this is an extraordinarily complex section of the code. It's been amended over and over again. Instead of throwing the whole thing out and rewriting it, it's been amended over and over, and certain sections are grandfathered, and it depends on when you implemented this in your community where you fall in that grandfathering, or where you fall in the new language. So there is a formula that applies to the communities that expand their hotel motel tax, which is also called a lodging tax, and that can be negotiated in some instances. In other instances, it's already locked in. Depends on where you are in that grandfathering process. Again, I'm not making it very clear because it's not a very clear statute. But what I can say is that this doesn't change that. This legislation only applies when the the local government and the DMO disagree on either a change in their agreement, which is what you were referencing, or if they decide, the local government decides they want to change DMOs, then if the DMO doesn't agree to that, then it goes in front of this existing governing board called the Performance Review Board of DCA. Does that help, Senator?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, Senator Mello?
Mr. Hughes, one of the things that the Chairman Beach brought up was the need to compete for some of these other sporting events. And we do have a lot of cities, like one I represent, that are in the old code section, which doesn't allow them to compete for this tourism-related product, to make investment in that. Would it not be true that if they, moved up possibly into the new code section, when we talk about competing for a sporting event, would that be a tourism-related product they could invest in?
I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV, so I don't want to opine on that. I think that I can say that a destination marketing organization has the ability to market that area, that destination. So if the city of Savannah, where you're from, wanted to attract the biggest volleyball tournament in the history of volleyball tournaments, they could probably target market and highlight why your community would be great for that. So there is some flexibility in marketing. As far as a specific fund for bringing it there and setting up the infrastructure, I can't speak to that. It would depend on where you were in the code section. You're making me sweat a little bit.
Well, I would
It's complex.
I'll just echo what he said. I mean, like City of Alpharetta, for example, they have an equestrian facility, so they go after a lot of equestrian events. And the Convention and Visitors Bureau goes and markets and says, hey, come here and do your horse shows and stay in our hotels and eat at our restaurants and so on. But what I was talking about was more the big sporting events, because when you go after a Super Bowl, I was talking to Doug Hertz, who was the chair of the host committee last time we got the Super Bowl when the Rams and the Patriots played. It was $20 million, and they had to, I mean, it was unbelievable, the presentations and what they had to do to show the NFL that they could handle the Super Bowl. And so it's a very competitive business, and we've just got to figure out how to fund that. That's a whole nother issue.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point, Mr. Chairman, I know that is separate from the legislation that Senator Hickman is proposing.
Yeah, no, this is very separate. I just bring that up to.
Absolutely. I feel that's a conversation that this committee, the tourism committee, can be having right now, especially as we lead up to large global events like the World Cup.
But I do think Convention and Visitors Bureaus can go after Little League baseball tournaments or horse shows or different things they can do to help market that area. So, all right, any other questions from the committee? Okay, what's the will? First off, we haven't had public hearing on this. Is there anybody that wants to speak in favor or opposition in the audience on this bill? Okay, what's the will of the committee?
Do pass.
All right, we've got a motion do pass by Senator Mallow, a second by Senator McLaurin. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposition? No opposition. Thank you. Appreciate it, and we'll get this to rules.
Good, thank you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, we've got one more bill, and I've already talked to the sponsor of the bill, Senator Burns. We're going to do a hearing only on this bill. We've got a meeting Tuesday morning, so we could vote it out Tuesday morning. We've got an 8 o'clock meeting on Tuesday to hear that bill and a couple other bills. But I really want to vet that one part of the bill on the liens on state property. So the floor is yours, and we're working off of LC 4722, no.
2284S.
Okay, all right.
84S. So there is a substitute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee's time. This is the result of the Development Authority, Downtown Development Authority Study Committee that I chaired last year. And we had a number of recommendations. You will see 3 of them in this bill. 2 of them are fairly straightforward. One of them is a bit more complex. So let's first look at the easier options. If you look at Section 1, we've had some issues with, by the way, I have to start by saying I want to thank our friends with Georgia Economic Development Association. I want to thank our friends with the Association of General Contractors. We had very strong dialogue. ACCG, GMA, all were involved in this process. So this is the result of 10 or more, not really 10, 5 or more study committee meetings. But on Section 1, one of the issues that we identified was that we had in some cases, by the way, 99.7% of all development authorities do a great job. We support them. We want to make sure they continue to do what is best in the interest of economic growth in our state. But in some cases, we had some members of the board that were being held in limbo. In other words, their terms had expired, but they were not being reappointed. So you had a situation where a member of a development authority was on the board, but had an expired term, and we needed for them to be reappointed or replaced in a timely manner. And we did not put any restriction on that, but so if you look at lines 32, 33, 34, there's a provision there that said, provided, however, that such holdover period shall not exceed 6 months. So you have 6 months to either reappoint or replace, and in the event that such a 6-month holdover period expires without a successor being elected, then the remaining directors of the board can elect a successor. And again, we have a few, not many, but a few commissions that do not do this in a timely manner. And so that's why you see the language on 32, 33, and 34. Just to keep the board itself current.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question on that. So like in Fulton County, the Development Authority is appointed by the county commissioner. Each county commissioner
Correct.
gets an appointment,
Correct.
gets a person on the Development Authority. Is that the way it works in most counties?
No.
Well, if it doesn't, then, so the board itself would elect somebody?
Well, let's take DeKalb, for example. My understanding is that in DeKalb County, the executive makes a nomination, and the board confirms the nomination.
Okay.
But regrettably, as certain members of the board expire, the executive doesn't always make the decision to either reappoint or replace, meaning that the commission never has an opportunity to express its position.
To confirm.
To confirm, correct. Now, that happens very, very rarely, very rarely.
So what you're saying in this bill is that if the CEO of DeKalb did not do that, after 6 months, the board itself could put someone in that position?
Or reappoint.
Okay.
Now, I want you to know that's a compromise with the support of GEDA
Okay.
and others, because we did not want to get into a situation where someone term might expire and they not have a voting position on the board, and the oversight, the county commission or whatever, could just let it become dormant, let it become non-functional because of lack of members.
I got you.
So I would suggest that the remaining directors would identify a successor until such time as the county did what it was constitutionally required to do.
Thank you. Any other questions on section 1 before he goes to section 2? All right.
All right, section 2 really deals with training. As you know, development authorities engage in multi-million, and in some cases, multi-billion-dollar deals. And at this point in time, there is no provision for annual training associated with being a development authority member. There was a caveat that was struck in lines 43, 40, and 44 that provided some grandfathering. Well, that was now 22 years ago, 23 years ago, so we struck that language so that when you come in, you have some initial 8 hours of training as a member of a development authority, and then after July the 1st of 2024, directors would then be required to have a 2-hour training refresher. It can be online, it can be presence-based. We did not stipulate the restrictions on that, but if you'll notice on lines 51 and 53, if you fail to complete your annualized training requirements for 2 consecutive years, you will have your voting rights basically suspended until you complete the training. Now, if you work for the state of Georgia and you drive a state of Georgia vehicle, you're required to take an online course in motor vehicle safety. If you're an employee of the state of Georgia, you are required on an annual basis to take online training in workplace harassment, sexual harassment, and intimidation. So this is not an onerous request. Again, it comes with the support of GEDA. Any questions on section 2? Finally, the more challenging one. Section 3 deals with the lien rights of contractors who are providing services to a development authority. So it appears, and I'm not an attorney, and I'm certainly not a construction bond attorney, although we've had attorneys from both GEDA and the Association of General Contractors review this. Basically what this attempts to do, or what it does, is it provides the contractor with a lien hold interest in case the project comes into default. So right now, if a contractor has provided goods or services to an authority on a particular project, and that project becomes insolvent, the contractor has no recourse, has no lien rights. So if you look with me, please, at lines 91, really on through 104, it is technical, legal details. And I think the most important thing, Mr. Chairman, for your concerns is notwithstanding any provisions of subsection B of this code section or any provision of Georgia law limiting or prohibiting the attachment of liens. So this would not allow for a lien if it violated Georgia law, and I would by inference suggest that that would be Georgia property. Prohibiting the attachment of liens to public property to the contrary in the event that the real estate for which the labor, services, and materials are furnished is owned or titled to a development authority or downtown development authority, regardless of whether such party is created constitutionally. Such special lien specified in subsection A, again, you see that, you notice on line 97, each special lien specified in subsection A of this code section may attach to a usufruct in such property if such labor, services, and materials are furnished at the instance of the holder of the usufruct. Now again, look quickly at line 99. A lien attaching to a usufruct interest pursuant to this subsection shall be subject to levy and sale, notwithstanding any provisions, statutory or common law to the contrary. Basically, this section is designed to protect general contractors who have provided services to a development authority and the development authority's project is unsuccessful and becomes insolvent. Right now, those contractors have no recourse to recoup any of their cost of their materials, labor, services that they provided, and this will give them the same measure of protection that they would enjoy on a private project. And I'll invite our friends from both GEDA, I think we have Mr. Cagle here, and also from the Georgia Association of General Contractors, Mr. Woodall here. I'd invite them to come and speak to the measure.
Before you come up and speak, let's see if we have any questions, and I have a question too.
Sure.
Senator McLaurin?
Yes.
Three.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman. Great bill. Would you agree with me? I mean, it seems like one of the reasons we've got prohibitions on liens on public properties in general, we don't want people putting liens on
Public
government
property.
entities, whatever.
That's right.
But the closer that a government entity gets to a private party and a private contractee, the more it makes sense from a legal standpoint to allow that type of a right. I mean, I assume that's the idea behind
That's
that.
the concept here, yes.
That-
If I may, I believe the situation is where a development authority is working through a project, and the project itself is contracted with the general contractor, and that project entity becomes insolvent. Now all of a sudden, the contractor has no way to access any asset.
Yeah, it really seems like a way to just give life and meaning to those contracts to make sure they're enforceable. So it seems like great public policy, and I appreciate you bringing it. Thank you.
Let me say, I'm way outside of my league because I'm not an attorney. Question?
Senator Hodges?
A practical example. My development authority owns a building, and they lease it to me.
Okay.
They lease it to me. And I tell them that for the lease, I'm going to go out and I'm going to add so many square feet to the warehouse, or I'm going to do these leasehold improvements. I hire Billy Hickman as a contractor. Billy comes and he does all the work in good faith, and then I don't pay him.
That's right.
Right now, as it stands, he has no recourse. He can sue me,
But-
but I mean, it's basically unsecured. He has no lien.
He has no lien.
Now, he would have a lien on the real property. He would
Correct.
have lien rights, which would attach, and so that would mean then that the development authority, in the absence of me, who the lessor, the person leasing it, didn't pay, then that gives him an opportunity to recover, and it brings the development authority, puts a little more skin in the game for them too.
They now, when we discussed this in committee and in our study committee, it got rather detailed for sure. And certainly these cases of default are very rare, very, very rare. But when they occur, that contractor's left with nothing.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it. Oh,
You seen it?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Maybe they're not as rare as I
Absolutely.
think they may be.
Does this, and the second question, my last question, does does this affect the Development Authority's ability to put a mortgage on real property?
That's a great question. I would not be able to render a
And
reasonable
if they
response.
do
To my
put a-
knowledge, that would not be
If
the
they do
case.
put a mortgage on the property, does the holder of the mortgage, are their rights superior to the lien rights?
Again, you're in an area that I do not enjoy expertise.
But I guess the main thing here is that contractors didn't have rights before and they do. now.
Exactly.
Okay.
Before, the contractors had no rights, and now the contractors have rights. And I think if the committee wills, what we can do is bring the attorneys in and have them provide the detail.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about what I wanna do for Tuesday morning, but I wanna get some more questions and
Okay.
then hear from Mr. Woodall. I believe you wanna speak.
Yeah.
But, go ahead, Senator Dugan, Chairman Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hodges, the questions you're asking have not been added to as new language to the bill.
Right.
So it wouldn't be creating, off the top of my head, it wouldn't create an additional burden like you were discussing on the mortgage. It doesn't address that. So if that was there, that would already be existing law, and I've never seen that before. What he's talking about with the mortgaging?
Not aware of that either.
And so that's a long way of saying, no, don't think so. I'm more curious about the liens.
harder to get a mortgage.
Yeah, I'm more curious about the lien stuff, so
No, we very much appreciate the Senate Study Committee and the opportunity to participate in the hearings. And this, I've represented.
Your name, can you tell us your name and your organization, please?
Mark Woodall, Associated General Contractors of Georgia. And we had an opportunity to present this issue. It was new to me. Some of our attorneys brought it to us. And we were able to engage with the committee and engage with GEDA. And basically, we don't care how we get there, but we feel very strongly that if a construction provider has performed per the terms of the contract, they need a remedy for payment. And so we've talked about a bunch of different ways to do it. This is the way that we both agree can accomplish what needs to be done. One, in fact, they have done what they were contractually obligated to do, but to have a remedy to get that payment for the work done.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. I'm Grant Cagle. I lead the Georgia Economic Developers Association. So thank you again for your time. And thank you to the author for this bill. We look forward to the continued work on it. The first and second section we do support. We really like the first and second section. We appreciate your willingness on our changes to those. Section 3 about the lien, I'm not an expert on that, so I don't come with any solutions, but we have had many attorneys look at it, and maybe we need to continue to do that going into the next meeting. But we want to support the contractors, but we also want to support the development authorities across the state and the State Department of Economic Development as well. So however we need to do that, we're here to support.
Senator Burns, let me ask you a question. Chairman Burns. What happens when the state owns the property? Let's say the state goes and buys a piece of property, does a deal with a manufacturer that's going to bring jobs here, then they go out of, the deal goes bad, let's just say. We own the land and the pad and some of the site, but
Right.
they were building a site and they go defunct.
That's a great question. I think we're going to need probably some legal counsel there. As I read the provisions, it points out that notwithstanding any provisions of the Georgia law limiting or prohibiting attachment of liens, if Georgia owns the property, I would have to defer to an attorney, but I don't think, regrettably, this would apply.
I mean, 'cause
I will tell you, I would suggest to you that I have full faith and confidence in the state of Georgia and in their economic development efforts, and I would anticipate that as they go through that process, they would provide support and remedy to those who have provided services.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, here's what I'd like the committee to do. I would love for you guys to really read this section 3. I think the committee's fine with section 1 and 2. Am I correct? Would you say? Everybody, 1 and 2 is
Thank you.
great. Thank you for, and I want to thank you for all your hard work on your study committee and all the work you've put into this. Thank you very much. I would like the committee to really look at section 3. I'm going to meet with the sponsor between now and Tuesday morning. We'll have you back Tuesday morning
Tuesday
and
morning.
hopefully give you a vote.
Thank you.
But what I'd like to do is get with you and maybe some of the attorneys or the
Bring the
legislative council and figure out and answer some of these questions that we had on the liens. And I think once we get through that, we're going to be able to have a very good bill and get you a vote on Tuesday morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any-
I would like to add just one thing, and that is the cooperation that we've received from the development authorities. And I will suggest to you that the vast majority do a phenomenal job, and
Yeah.
there are no concerns. One of the things the study committee identified with the help of the development authorities were best practices across the state. And the development authorities are going to establish some guidelines for one another so that other development authorities can adhere to what the GEDA believes are the best ways to run authorities across the state of Georgia.
Well, let me just say this to the committee. Development authorities play a major role in economic development.
Huge.
We have a gratuities clause, and we can't have like the state of Texas has an $800 million enterprise fund where they can go out and write checks to companies and do some things that we're not allowed to do. Development authorities allow us to do some incentives, if you will, to get the business, and they've played a major part. So we care about development authorities. We want to make sure everything's tight, and we want to make sure people get their bills paid. So we'll get through this. We're going to work on it. Senator McLaurin, you being an attorney, I'm going to lean on you a little bit. So let's look at this, and we'll be back Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Any questions? Any final comments from the committee? I want to thank the committee for being here at 4 o'clock on Thursday. I know a lot of you want to get home, so thank y'all for being here. And if there's no other business, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.